Do it again. Enemies close, have me thinking they're friends. 10 toes down, I'll be free until the end. Crib outside the city, I don't feel safe in my hands. Took so many years, I was waiting for the wins. I'm in debt to no one but the one who took my sins. I do it for real, there's no reason to pretend. If I do it once, I do it again. Add it up, bankroll, euro, peso, add it up. I'm just doing me, everything is on me. You matter what, add it up. Me, everything is on me, gon' back it up. Matter what? Told you I'ma do me, why you hating on me? It's not adding up. I do roll like a Mack truck, country heart, I might cop a farm and go act up. Lot of scars, I was cold-hearted, now I'm backed up. Keep it real, I do this once a month, I don't rap much. I just take the money and go stack up. Only buying car, take it tatted up. All that other bull, it don't matter much. You only climb me, I put the ladders up. No fault. I done doubled up on the workload. I think I fell in love with the bankroll. Pray up, get money, then we lay low. Add it up, bankroll, euro, peso, add it up. I'm just doing me, everything is on me. You matter what? Add it up, bankroll, euro, peso, add it up. I'm just doing me, everything is on me. Oh, you matter what? Add it up. Told her if it's all me. On me, gon' back it up. Matter what? Told you I'ma do me, why you hating on me? It's not adding up. Told her if it's all me, everything is on me, gon' back it up. Matter what? Told you I'ma do me, why you hating on me? It's not adding up. I ran up a check, I might do it again. Enemies close, have me thinking they're friends. 10 toes down, I'll be free until the end. Crib outside the city, I don't feel safe in my hands. Took so many years, I was waiting for the wins. I'm in debt to no one but the one who took my sins. I do it for real, there's no reason to pretend. If I do it once, I do it again. Add it up, bankroll, euro, peso, add it up. I'm just doing me, everything is on me. You matter what? Add it up. Everything is on me, gon' back it up. Matter what? Told you I'ma do me, why you hating on me? It's not adding up. I do roll like a Mack truck, country heart, I might cop a farm and go act up.
Welcome to That's Gotta Hurt Live, wherever you're watching. Hope you're making tonight your masterpiece. My name is Dr. David Geier, orthopedic surgeon, sports medicine specialist, and media medical expert. Whether you play fantasy sports, whether you bet on sports, or you just love sports, like maybe tonight's college national championship game, whether you like any of that, I help you understand the injuries of pro and college athletes so that you can win your fantasy league, hopefully, win your sports bets, hopefully, or just enjoy the games more. Very excited to be here. Really great weekend of sports the last few days. Personally, for me, I had a great weekend because my teams did really well, but really crazy weekend with the playoffs, week 18 in the NFL, and that just wild Chargers-Raiders game when they both could have just played for a tie, and instead something, who the heck knows, and that all got messed up, and just a lot of stuff. Klay Thompson returned, as we talked about last week. I watched the beginning of that game. The fans were so emotional. He was emotional. That was really, really great to see. Really, really good weekend sports. A lot of stuff to get to in this episode. I will remind you, if you have any comments on the athletes we talk about, just tell me your first name and where you are, and then feel free to say what you're going to say. If you have other athletes you want to talk about, leave that in the chat as well. If you have questions about injuries that you personally have, if I have time to answer those, I'll try to do that at the end of the show. None of this is medical advice. I talk about this for information and educational purposes only, even if it's a discussion of your particular injury. And I am not involved in the care of these athletes. I'm not their doctor. I am not a reporter for these teams. I don't have inside sources. Well, I do have inside sources, but not with any of the ones we're going to talk about tonight. And so just know that I am looking at all this as an analyst, and I am not breaking news with any of this. All right, let's talk about first. So I've said on this show, I am a Tennessee Titans fan. I grew up in Memphis. I've lived in Memphis 3 times. And yes, Tennessee, the Titans are in Nashville, but you still got to cheer for your sort of home state team. They are the number 1 seed in the AFC after a just crazy up and down win over the Houston Texans, a team they should have just blown out and looked like they were going to blow out in the first half, and then they didn't show up in the second half, tried to lose that game. But in doing so, they kept the Kansas City Chiefs from being the number 1 seed. They are now the number 2 seed, and one of their key injuries that we need to talk about is wide receiver Tyreek Hill. He did something to his heel in pregame, and sometime before the kickoff, they elected to try to play him. After 14 snaps, they basically pulled him for the rest of the game. Without knowing more, it's hard to imagine in pregame warmups, unless he's been having something that they haven't told us in weeks, it's hard to imagine this is a bone problem. So to me, this much more likely strikes me as a problem of the plantar fascia. Get my trusty handy dandy foot model here. So that's the heel bone, right there. That's the calcaneus. The plantar fascia is not shown here, but it's this thick band of tissue that holds up your arch. And people with plantar fasciitis or a partial tear of that plantar fascia typically do it right there. So it hurts right at the origin on their calcaneus, sort of the ball of their foot, so to speak. And the problem with a plantar fascia partial rupture or tendonitis or plantar fasciitis is that it hurts with jumping, with sudden explosive movements. The only thing really that makes that heal quickly is rest. Long term, you can do things like platelet-rich plasma injections, but that would be sort of tricky in the days leading up to a game. I'm not sure if they would take that chance. You certainly can't do cortisone into that. Yes, it may feel good, but it makes it more likely that that plantar fascia ruptures, again, if that's what this is. So they're saying that they're going to see how he looks later this week. I would not expect him to practice that much in the days leading up to the game. Fortunately, they play Sunday night, so they got just about as long as you can have from when this started bothering him until game time. But I see this potentially being one that he is not at 100%, that he may be 70, 80%, maybe not even that, maybe 50%. They got Mecole Hardman. They got plenty of talent. You got Patrick Mahomes, you're fine. And you're playing the Steelers, and I know there's tons of Steelers fans down here in the low country, Charleston, South Carolina, but they're just not that good of a team. They're well coached, but I don't think they're that talented. I don't see them getting it done. So it would not at all surprise me. We'll talk about this maybe later in the week. If he's 40, 50, 60%, they may not play him at all and elect to give him more time to get that to heal because they should win without him, and you save him for the divisional round. We'll see how that goes. All right, next let's talk about Najee Harris. He is the Pittsburgh Steelers running back. And I tried to find video of this today. I didn't start watching that game till late in the fourth quarter. I was watching the Titans and found and at that point Najee Harris was playing, so I didn't think much about it. Turns out he had missed pretty much all of the first half. On the third play of the game, he was running, went for was being tackled, put his arm on the ground, and supposedly it twisted his elbow. Now, I have not found video of that, but it sounds like he may have hyperextended it or twisted it in a way that had caused a ligament injury. Let me get my handy dandy elbow model here. So the elbow, this one doesn't bend much, but it basically it's a hinge, bends, flexes, and extends. It doesn't do side to side. I suspect, and we're looking at this, this is the outside of the elbow, this is the inside of the elbow. You see this sort of complex of ligaments there. Those of you that are baseball fans know what this is. This is the ulnar collateral ligament. That's the ligament that tears in Tommy John injuries of pitchers. And it actually happens in sports other than pitching and throwing like football quarterbacks. Carson Palmer had that either with the Bengals or with the Cardinals, but he had a UCL injury. But most people in other sports, Paul George is dealing with this now with the Los Angeles Clippers in basketball. But a sport like basketball, a sport like football, you're not subjecting your elbow to this stress where the elbow opens up like it does when you're in a late cocking, early acceleration phase of pitching. And so for Najee Harris, even if he tore his UCL, they're not going to do a Tommy John surgery, but it can be really painful. Maybe they put him in a brace or something like that. They tried a sleeve during the game, and that helped, but if you notice, he was carrying the ball with his other hand. So I expect he'll be able to play, but this is one that is certainly not good news. You would hope that this is not going to be something, maybe he fumbles more often or things like that. From a fantasy standpoint, maybe you don't go too hard, changing what you do with Najee Harris. From a gambling standpoint, it's just at least something to consider. But in terms of big picture, and we don't know it's a UCL injury, but when you get sort of what sounds like a hyperextension twisting injury, where you plant your hand, that could potentially be something worth looking at. All right, let's talk next. Real quickly, let's talk about David Bakhtiari of the Green Bay Packers. He was one of the best offensive tackles, left tackles in football last year, protecting Aaron Rodgers. Right around New Year's Eve or so last year, after a game, I think the December 27th, he tore his ACL. And I remember the pundit saying, but he'll be back week 1. And I remember thinking, I told some of my friends that are big in football, I was like, I wouldn't know that I'd go down that ship. I know we used to say 6 months for an ACL, but when you're talking about really big guys, 330, 340 pounds or so, I typically am a little more conservative, say 9 months, but it can be up to 12 months. Well, he played in his first NFL game in week 18, so basically 12 months later. Now, why did it take so long? Well, one, big guy, it just takes a long time to return, and not just back to running and pushing off and all that kind of stuff, but it's doing it against huge defensive linemen and linebackers and being able to do it at the level he needs to be able to do it. But two, turns out, and I didn't know this, he had a second surgery a few months ago to clean out scar tissue and remove the cause of swelling. I assume the scar tissue was the cause of swelling. I don't know if his knee was stiff or it was just any time he'd go to do something, it would swell up, but they did basically a debridement is what the technical term for that clean up scar tissue is, and it sounds like that sort of turned the corner. He only played 27 plays. They took him out in the second quarter because he hadn't played in a year, and so he was getting back into game shape. Packers have the home field advantage. They have a bye this week, so now he has 2 more weeks. So I expect that they'll get his conditioning up, really work him harder, and yeah, maybe he gets through a full game. That's a lot to ask, but it's certainly possible. I'm not worried about it from a knee standpoint as much as a conditioning standpoint, but very happy for him. Always keep this in mind when you've got your offensive and defensive linemen with ACL tears, that typically is, in my mind, more like 9 to 12 months for a pro football player than 6 months that so many people are, he'll be ready for week 1. Maybe. And again, time is not the only factor. It's getting motion back. It's getting strength back. It's being able to land on it and push off on it just like normal, and it feels normal. There's a lot of balance and proprioception and plyometric strength, and there's a lot that goes into it that determines return to play, not just the amount of time. But that whole 6-month thing is probably a lot to ask in a lot of these NFL players. And last of my Memphis Grizzlies, currently the best team, Memphis Grizzlies, in the NBA. Not best team overall, but the best team right now. Memphis Grizzlies, I think they've won 16 of their last 20 or something like that. They're on a 9-game win streak, longest in the NBA, longest in franchise history. Overcome all kinds of injuries, overcome COVID. Their head coach is out with COVID. Now their starting center's out. And probably our best defensive player went out on Saturday. Went out on Saturday. He suffered an ankle injury, and get my handy dandy ankle model again. He suffered what they're saying is an ankle sprain. If you watch that video and they show it in really slow motion during that game, this part of his ankle, this is the outside of his ankle, this is the inside. This long bone on the outside of your leg and ankle is your fibula. The end of that, quick anatomy lesson, is what's called your lateral malleolus. And there's 3 ligaments that come off your lateral malleolus that stabilize the outside of your ankle, your ATFL, CFL, and PTFL. And if you watched, this doesn't bend this way. No ankle should bend that way. This part of his ankle, his lateral malleolus, was on the ground, except his ankle's like this. It literally was 90 degrees. I was actually worried he couldn't put any weight on it. I was actually worried. I texted somebody and said, I think it may be broken because he couldn't put any weight on it. But NBA stadiums all have, or they're all supposed to have, x-ray capability, so they would have known that very quickly if he broke it. The fact that that wasn't mentioned in any post-game press conference made me pretty confident it wasn't broken. Goes back, I assume it was done in Memphis, but gets evaluated because they were playing in Los Angeles. They were beating the Clippers that night, and they sent him home, got evaluated. Now they're saying 3 to 5 weeks. Ankle sprains are interesting, and it's a little bit based on, I should have just left this out, this isn't the only criteria, but ankle sprains, lateral ankle sprains, are graded grade 1, grade 2, grade 3. And, when you're talking about return to play, grade 1 is usually 0 to 2 weeks, grade 2 is 2 to 4 weeks, grade 3 is 4 to 6. But one of the ways, and you can figure this out on MRI, that determines grade 1, grade 2, grade 3, some of it's based on how unstable the ankle is to exam when you examine it, but it's also based on the number of those 3 ligaments that are torn. So if it's just an ATFL ligament, probably a grade 1, going to be 0 to 2 weeks. But, 2 ligaments, 3 ligaments, you kind of get where I'm headed with that. That's not the only thing. A lot of the challenge when you sprain an ankle, yes, you get those ligaments to heal, but one of the challenge, especially for a basketball player, is you've got to regain what's called proprioception, or balance. This is joint position sense. This is being able to stand on it, and your brain knows where that ankle is in space, so it makes those little stabilizing muscles around your ankle fire to basically, so you feel confident and you can land on it. You can push off on it. After you sprain an ankle, if you want to know what proprioception is, go stand on your bed, on your mattress, which is sort of soft, and just stand on that one injured ankle. And you'll get used to the pain because you can stand on an ankle sprain. It's not that bad once you kind of do it for a few seconds. But, I mean, heck, I'm doing it right now on hardwood floor, and you see I'm sort of wobbling a little bit. Try to do that on a mattress or a foam pad that gives a little bit, and you'll see what your body is doing and those little muscles firing to kind of stabilize the ankle. You lose that initially in an ankle sprain, and that's why physical therapy and working with the athletic trainers and the training staff, the sports medicine staff, is so important to get that back. And that's why in sports we talk about, we give in this case 3 to 5 weeks, but you hear a lot of times day to day. It's not that there's just, all right, you get an MRI and it looks healed. You've got to have that proprioception back, and then you've got to be able to use that to push off normally and to land normally. And you don't really know that till you put somebody through basketball moves. So ignoring pro athletes, but if you have a high school kid, a son or daughter that plays basketball or soccer or any of these sports, and they have an ankle sprain, this is why it's not just rest, ice compression, elevation, and then just wait for it to get better. Get them in to work with a physical therapist that rehabs a lot of athletes, and they can help that athlete get that back a lot faster. Yeah, you can do your mattress and sort of work on it that way, but they can show you safer and better ways to do that. So that is really important. Again, that is for the NBA best currently, Memphis Grizzlies. Yeah, so the Titans #1 seed, the Grizzlies 9-game win streak, currently in the 4 seed, but only 1 game out of the 3rd seed. We got a rough month. We got the Warriors coming up tomorrow night. That could be ugly with Clay coming back, and then we've got a bunch of tough games in January now with our best defender out, probably until the All-Star break in mid-February. But then we've got a pretty easy schedule the rest of the way. It should be really nice. Love, love, love that. All right, any injuries? That'd be funny if it's Ja, because obviously Ja Morant of the Memphis Grizzlies is dealing with a rotator cuff injury. Really, really tough problem. Hopefully not something that ends up needing surgery. Sometimes those do, but there are some things that people can do, be it physical therapy and medications and lots of things to try to get rotator cuff impingement or partial tears better. So it really depends on the degree of issue there. Very excited to be here with you. I am going to stop a little bit early tonight. I want to go watch Georgia, Alabama. If you have thoughts on who's going to win that, definitely shoot a message to me. But very excited to be here. Plan to be here right back here tomorrow night, 7 p.m. for That's Gotta Hurt Live. Thank you so much, and I will see you tomorrow. Take care.